I've been a roving patrol officer for 11 years, which is long enough to tell you that the job is mostly about driving. People hear security and they picture a man at a desk watching monitors, or somebody standing in a lobby with his hands folded. That's site security. What I do is different. I work for a contract company that covers the gated communities and the half-built developments and the storage yards out past where the city stops bothering to put up streetlights. I drive a marked truck with an amber bar on the roof, and I make rounds. A round is a list of stops, and at each stop there's a little plastic button screwed to a post or a wall, and I touch my wand to it, and the wand records the time and the location, and that proves I was there. The fancy word for it is a guard tour system. The button is a checkpoint. You hit your checkpoints in order, on schedule, and at the end of the night, the company can hand the client a clean report that says their property was watched. I'm telling you about the buttons because the buttons are the whole reason I noticed. If it had just been my eyes, I'd have talked myself out of it. Eyes lie at 3 in the morning, eyes get tired and they fill in gaps. But the wand doesn't get tired. The GPS in the truck doesn't get tired. And when your eyes and your instruments start disagreeing, you learn pretty fast which one to trust. And it isn't the eyes. The development was called Harrow's Reach. I want to be precise about names because precision is the only thing I have left that feels like ground under me. Harrow's Reach was one of those subdivisions that got platted out before the last downturn and then stalled. The developer ran out of money or interest, and what you were left with was a beautiful new road grid laid down in a field, with curbs and gutters and street signs and fire hydrants and almost no houses. Maybe 9 homes finished out of a planned 200. The rest of it was lots flat rectangles of graded dirt with a driveway apron poured at the street, a little concrete tongue sticking out where a garage was supposed to go someday. Streets named after trees that had never grown there. Sycamore Court, Linden Way, a cul-de-sac called Whitethorn Hollow. Our company had the contract to patrol it because the Homeowners Association, all 9 of them, were paying for the privilege of not having their finished houses stripped for copper while they slept. Vacant developments get hit constantly. Thieves love them. You've got new construction, new wiring, new appliances in the model home, and nobody around for a quarter mile. So 3 times a night, my route took me through Harrow's Reach, and at the entrance there was a checkpoint button, and out at the back where the road dead-ended against the tree line, there was a second one. And in between, I was supposed to drive every street and shine my spotlight down every driveway. That's the part that matters. Every driveway. The company's standing post orders for that site said to physically illuminate each driveway apron, because the apron is the choke point if somebody's going to back a truck up to a house and load it with stolen material. They're doing it from a driveway. So I'd creep along at maybe 10 miles an hour with my spotlight handle in my left hand, sweeping each apron, and most of them were just bare concrete leading to bare dirt. A driveway to nowhere. There were dozens of them out there. Dozens of little concrete tongues poured for houses that would never exist. I'd worked that route for about 4 months before the night I'm going to tell you about. October. I remember it was October because the heater in the truck had started kicking on, and the fields out there get a low ground fog that time of year. A thin white sheet about knee-high that the spotlight turns into a wall. My shift ran 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The first pass through Harrow's Reach was usually around 11, the second around 2, the third around 4:30. On the night it started, my 2 o'clock pass was completely ordinary. I hit the entrance button, drove the grid, swept the aprons, hit the back button, left. Clean. I've got the data still. 11 checkpoints, all in sequence, all on time. The 4:30 pass is where it began, and it began so small that I didn't even register it as wrong. I registered it as a question. Linden Way had 11 lots on it. I knew it had 11 because I'd counted aprons on that street. Probably 400 times by then. That's the kind of thing your brain does on a route. It gives you little numbers to hold on to keep from going to sleep. 11 aprons on the south side. The north side was ungraded scrub. Lot 1 through Lot 11, even numbered addresses. 202 through 222 Lindenway. And on that pass, sweeping the spotlight, I counted 10. Now, you count 10 when there's supposed to be 11. The first thing you assume is that you miscounted, or that you've been doing this so long your brain merged two of them. So I stopped the truck. I backed up. I swept the whole street slow, apron by apron, counting out loud, which is something I do. 202, 204, 206. And where 208 should have been, between the apron at 206 and the apron at 210, there was no apron. There was no concrete tongue. There was grass, not freshly disturbed dirt, not a torn-up patch where somebody had jackhammered out a slab. Grass, the same dead October field grass as the unbuilt lots, with that knee-high fog sitting on it, undisturbed, like it had been growing there since the glaciers left. I sat there with the engine running, and I did the only thing a reasonable man does. I came up with an explanation. The day shift. We had a day patrol too, a guy named Reyes, and there was always overlap and confusion about which company crew was doing what at these half-dead sites. Maybe the developer had finally sold the lot. Maybe somebody'd come in with equipment during the day and pulled the apron out to re-pour it. And the work was so clean and the grass laid in so fast that, no! Even as I was thinking it, I knew it didn't hold. You don't remove a concrete apron and reseed it with established grass in a single day. But I needed the thought, so I took it and I made a note in my phone. And I told myself I'd ask Reyes. I hit the back checkpoint. I left. And here's the thing that I keep coming back to. The thing I should have understood was a warning the very first night. When I left Harrow's Reach and rejoined the main route, when I pulled back out onto the county road, and the radio crackled and dispatch checked me through to my next site, I felt fine. I felt like a man who'd seen something odd and would sort it out in daylight. The dread didn't come that night. The dread is patient. It waited until I had enough data to understand what I was looking at, and then it arrived all at once, and it never left. I want to describe the dispatcher because she's part of this, and because she's one of the few people who can confirm any of it. Her name was Dana. She ran the overnight board for our company, which meant she sat in an office 40 minutes away with a radio, a phone, and a screen showing every patrol truck's GPS as a little blue dot crawling across a map. When I hit a checkpoint, it pinged her system. When I went off-road, her system flagged it. We talked maybe 20 times a night, mostly just status checks. 312, 10-8, meaning I'm in service. I'm moving. She had a flat, dry way of talking that I liked. She'd been doing it longer than me. So the next night, let me be careful. The next night was a Thursday. I asked Reyes before he went off, and I came on. Caught him at the yard where we swapped trucks. I asked him if anything was happening at Harrow's Reach, any work, any new owners on Linden Way. He looked at me like I'd asked him about the weather on the moon. "Nothing's happening out there," he said. "Nothing ever happens out there. That's the only good thing about it." And he laughed and got in his car. That should have closed the door on the day shift theory. It didn't, because I wanted it open. I wanted a boring answer so badly that I decided Reyes just didn't know, that the work order hadn't reached him, that there was some explanation living one level up that I couldn't see from where I stood. I drove out to my route, and on my 11 o'clock pass through Harrow's Reach, I went straight to Linden Way, and I counted the aprons, and there were 11. 11, 202 through 222. The apron at 208 was right where it had always been, a clean gray concrete tongue with a hairline crack across the corner that I recognized, because you do start to recognize them. I sat there a long time. The fog was lighter that night. I got out of the truck. That's against procedure on a vacant site. You stay in the vehicle unless you're investigating an active issue. You don't go strolling around offering yourself up to whoever might be hiding behind a stack of pallets. But I got out, and I walked up to the apron at 2:08, and I crouched down, and I put my hand flat on the concrete. It was cold. It was real. It had a stamped contractor's mark in one corner, a little diamond logo, same as all the others. There was nothing wrong with it except that the night before it had not existed, and grass had grown where it stood. I'm a practical person. I don't read about ghosts. The most superstitious thing I do is knock on wood, and I do that ironically. So standing on that apron, my whole instinct was to find the rational chain, the sequence of ordinary events that produced this impossible result. And the rational mind, when it can't find that chain, will manufacture one. It told me I'd looked at the wrong street the night before. Maybe what I'd thought was Linden Way had been Sycamore. The streets out there were identical, same curbs, same dead grass, same signs. Easy to get turned around. That was it. I'd counted Sycamore Court and thought it was Linden. Mystery solved, except I had the wand data, I had the GPS track. And when I got back to the truck and pulled it up on my phone, our system lets us see our own tracks. The 4:30 pass from the night before showed my truck stopped on Linden Way for 4 minutes. Not Sycamore. Linden. The blue line of my route sat parked on Linden Way at the exact moment I'd counted 10 aprons. So I hadn't been on the wrong street. I'd been precisely where I thought I was, looking at a street with one fewer driveway than it has tonight. That was the first contradiction between my eyes and my instrument. And like I told you, when those two disagree, you don't side with the eyes. But the instruments were telling me something the eyes couldn't have invented, and that's worse. That's the thing I want you to understand about how this kind of horror works on a man in my profession. It doesn't come at you as a monster. It comes at you as a discrepancy in your own paperwork. It comes as a number that should match and doesn't. And your training, every instinct you've built over 11 years, says, find the discrepancy, document it, resolve it. The job itself walks you straight into the mouth of the thing. I started documenting, not for the company I knew better than to put any of this in an official report yet, because the company's response to a roving officer reporting that driveways were appearing and disappearing would be a drug test followed by a termination. I documented for myself. I started taking photographs. Every pass through Harrow's reach, I'd stop on Linden Way and photograph all 11 aprons in order, with the truck's clock visible in the corner of each shot when I could manage it. I'd note the count in my phone. 11, 11, 11. For 5 nights straight, it was 11. And I started to feel the embarrassment that comes when you've scared yourself over nothing. That hot, prickly feeling. And I almost let it go. Then on the 6th night, it was 10 again. And it was a different apron missing. 214 this time. The night I first noticed, it had been 208 gone. Now 208 was back and 214 was the patch of grass. Same undisturbed field grass, same fog laid over it like a sheet. The apron simply not present. The 2 neighbors on either side sitting there normal as anything with the gap between them. I photographed it. I have the photograph. You can line it up against the photograph from the previous night and see 214 there and then not there. The only difference being the timestamp and the fact that one of them shows a driveway and one of them shows a meadow. And that's when the behavior of the thing started to come clear to me, because I'm a man who watches for patterns. That's the actual job. You're not muscle. You're a sensor that moves. You drive the same loops night after night so that when something is different, you'll feel it before you can even name it. And what I started to feel was that the missing apron wasn't random. It moved. It moved down the street in a way that wasn't quite sequential, but wasn't quite chaos either. And it only ever happened on the last pass of the night. The 4:30 pass. Never the 11, never the 2. Always the one closest to dawn, the one where the fog was thickest and the dark was oldest. I changed my route to test it, which you're not supposed to do. Your route is your route. It's on the post orders. Dispatch sees you deviate and she calls you on it. But I started doing my Harrow's reach passes in a different order. I hit it first at 10:15, dead early, before the fog rose. 11 aprons. I hit it last, swung back out at 5:40 just before end of shift, the latest I'd ever been out there. And at 5:40 there were 9. 2 missing. The latest I went, the more were gone. The closer to dawn, the more the street unbuilt itself. Dana called me on the deviation the second night I did it. 3:12, she said. You're running your sights out of sequence, everything okay? And I said, yeah, just mixing it up to throw off anybody watching the pattern, which is a real tactic, it's a legitimate thing to say. And she accepted it. But there was a pause before she accepted it. A half second of dead air on the radio that I've thought about 100 times since. Because Dana could see my GPS track. Dana could see my blue dot sitting parked on Linden Way for 4, 5, 6 minutes at a stretch, 3 and 4 times a night, doing nothing. And a good dispatcher notices that. A good dispatcher files it away. I should tell you what the fog looked like in the spotlight when an apron was gone, because this is the kind of detail that I think about when I can't sleep, which is most of the time now. When the apron was there, the spotlight hit the concrete and bounced, threw a hard white glare back at you, and the fog sort of broke around it. But over the empty patches, the gaps, the light didn't bounce. It went down into the grass and the fog, and it just stayed, soaked in, like I was shining the light into a hole that happened to be shaped like a field. The grass over those gaps never moved, even when there was wind moving the grass everywhere else. I'd sit there with the window down and feel the wind on the side of my face, see the scrub bending all up and down the unbuilt north side of the street, and the patch where 214 used to be would be still as a photograph, still as a held breath. I want to be honest about what I was feeling at this point, because the temptation is to make myself sound braver and more clear-headed than I was. The truth is, I was excited. There's a part of a certain kind of person, the kind who takes a job sitting alone in the dark for 11 years, that has been waiting his whole life for the world to finally show him something, to prove that the boredom was hiding a secret. And when Harrow's reach started rearranging itself in front of me, some sick part of me felt chosen. Felt like I'd been put on that route for a reason. I drove out there each night with my stomach tight, half terror and half this awful eagerness. And I'd hit the entrance button and feel the whole development holding still around me, waiting to show me the next trick. I'm not proud of that, but if I leave it out, you won't understand why I didn't just quit. A smarter man quits. A smarter man takes the boring answer and runs. I had the boring answer offered to me over and over. It's the day shift. You miscounted, you're tired, and every time I turned it down because I wanted the unboring one more. The pattern held for about 3 weeks. The missing aprons, always on the late pass, always more of them the later I went. Always undisturbed grass and dead still fog where the concrete should have been. I had a phone full of photographs, and then the pattern changed. The way these things always change once they've got you watching, once they know you're watching. And I do think it knew. I think the watching was the point it changed to include a house. There were 9 finished homes in Harrow's reach. I knew all 9. I knew which ones were occupied, which were the developer's unsold inventory, which was the model. The model home sat on a corner lot at the end of Linden Way, where it teed into Whitethorn Hollow. and it was the nicest house out there, fully furnished to show buyers what their dream could look like, all staged with fake books and a fake fruit bowl, and beds made up with throw pillows nobody had ever slept on. It had a real driveway, a full one, not just an apron concrete all the way up to a 3-car garage. Address was 1 Whitethorn Hollow, the flagship, lit up at night by a couple of landscape lights on a timer, the only consistently lit structure in the whole dead grid. On a Tuesday in early November, on my 5:30 pass, the model home was gone. Not dark, not burned down, not demolished. Gone, the way the aprons went. Where the model home and its full driveway and its landscape lighting had stood, there was a graded empty lot with a single concrete apron at the street, a tongue of concrete leading up to nothing, with the fog sitting on it and the grass behind it dead still. The corner of Linden and Whitethorn, where the flagship of the whole development had stood, lit up every night for 4 months, was an empty lot with a driveway that ended in a field. I want to tell you I handled that with professional composure. I sat in the truck and I made a sound I'm not going to try to describe, and I gripped the wheel until my hands hurt, and I think I said no out loud several times, the way you do when your body rejects information before your mind can. Because the aprons, you understand, the aprons I could almost live with. An apron is nothing, a slab of concrete. The world losing track of a slab of concrete is unsettling, but it's small. But a whole house. A house with a roof and walls and $40,000 of staged furniture and a timer-controlled lighting system. A house that existed in the county tax records. A house I had personally shown my spotlight on 600 times. For that to be a quiet, empty field with the fog undisturbed on it meant that the rules I'd been telling myself about, the rules where this was somehow contained to driveways, were not the rules. There were no rules. Or the rules were so much larger than me that the part I could see was the size of a driveway. I hit the back checkpoint with my hand shaking. I drove out, I keyed the radio, and I almost told Dana. I had the button pressed down and the air open, and I almost said it. And what stopped me was the most coward and the most sane thing in me at the same time. I knew that if I said it out loud on the recorded company channel, I would never be able to take it back, and they would pull me off the route, and I would never know. The wanting to know had me by the throat. So I let go of the button and I said, 312, clear of the Harrow site, 10-8 to the storage yard. And Dana said, copy 312. And the model home was gone, and nobody in the world knew but me. I went back the next night. The model home was there. Lit up, fruit bowl, throw pillows, the whole staged lie of it, sitting on its corner like it had never left. I drove past it 3 times that night just to keep seeing it. Each time it was there, and I understood in the cold, practical part of me that kept working even while the rest of me was coming apart, that I now had 2 possibilities, and I needed to figure out which one was true, because everything depended on it. The first possibility was that the things weren't really vanishing, that they went somewhere, that at 4:30 in the morning, 214 Linden Way and the model home and all the rest weren't being destroyed, but were being moved, removed from this place and put in another place. And the second possibility, the one I couldn't stand, was that they weren't going anywhere, that the empty field was the truth and the driveways and houses were the lie, that Harrow's Reach was a field, had always been a field, and the development was something laid over the field like a tablecloth, and at the oldest hour of the night, the tablecloth slipped and you could see the bare table underneath. That what I was watching wasn't things disappearing, it was the real world showing through. I couldn't tell which one was true from the truck, so I did the thing I should never have done. I parked and I waited, and I watched a driveway go. It was a Friday, the 15th of November. I positioned the truck on Linden Way with a clear view of 3 aprons, 206, 208, 210 at 5:15 in the morning, engine off, lights off except the parking lamps, spotlight in my hand. The fog was as thick as I'd ever seen it, a solid white field of it up past the bottom of the street signs. I killed the parking lamps too after a minute because I had the feeling, and I want to be careful here because feelings aren't evidence, but I had the strong physical feeling that the lights were keeping it from happening, that it was shy of light. So I sat in the full dark with the cold seeping in through the door, and I watched 3 concrete aprons that I could just make out as pale shapes in the fog, and I waited for one of them to stop being there. I'm going to tell you what I saw, and I'm going to tell it plainly, because dressing it up would be a kind of lie, and I'm done with lies. I told myself too many for too long out there. Nothing moved. That's the first thing. There was no shimmer, no fade, no special effect. I kept my eyes on 208, the middle one, the one with the hairline crack I knew. And at some point, I don't know the exact second, and that's part of it, there was no exact second. There was no moment of change I could point to. At some point, I realized I had been looking at grass for a while, that the pale shape of 208 had been gone from my attention long enough that I couldn't say when it left. The way you can't catch the moment you fall asleep. The way you can't see your own blind spot. Because the thing about the blind spot is, your brain fills it in so smoothly you never know it's there. That's what it was like. The apron didn't vanish. My ability to perceive that it had ever been there simply ended, and the grass that had been underneath the whole time, the grass that I now understood with my whole crawling body had been underneath the whole time, became visible, like a word you've stared at until it stops being a word. And that told me which possibility was true. The terrible one. The field was the truth. Harrow's reach was the tablecloth. And the reason it only happened on the late pass, the reason there was more of it the closer to dawn, was not that the development was being taken away piece by piece. It was that the closer you got to dawn, the thinner the lie wore, and the more of the real field showed through. And a man with a spotlight and 11 years of training to notice exactly what's different from one night to the next was the worst possible person to put out there, because I was built to see the seam. I sat in that dark for I don't know how long. And then the part of me that is still, after everything, a security officer, the part that has procedures wired into it below the level of thought, that part made me reach for the door handle. Because procedure says when you observe an anomaly on a protected site, you investigate it on foot, you clear it, you verify. And against every screaming animal instinct I had, I opened the door of the truck and I stepped out onto Linden Way, into the fog, to walk up to the empty lot where 208 had been, to put my hand on the grass and find out for certain whether it was real. The fog was over my knees. The cold of it was wrong, not cold like November, cold like a basement, cold like something with no sun in its memory. I left the door open behind me, I remember that. I left the door open and the dome light on as a tether, a little yellow square of the normal world I could run back to, and I walked across the street toward the gap, counting under my breath the way I do. And I want you to understand that I was still, even then, telling myself a story where this ended fine, where I touched the grass and it was just grass and I went home and slept. I got to where 208 should have been. I crouched. I reached down through the fog and I put my hand flat on the ground where for months a concrete apron with a hairline crack had been, and what was under my palm was cold dirt and dead grass and the small, stiff stalks of a field that had never known a single day of construction. Real as anything I have ever touched. And under my hand I could feel, faintly coming up through the cold ground, a regularity, a vibration, slow and even and enormous, spaced out in long intervals like something very large and very far down was breathing in its sleep. And in the rhythm of it, in the awful patience of it, I understood the last thing, the thing that turned all of it personal, and I have to make myself say it plainly. The field was not empty. The field was occupied. The development wasn't laid over nothing. It was laid over something, a lid on something. 200 platted lots in a grid of streets named after trees, poured down on top of something the size of a subdivision to keep it from looking up. And what showed through near dawn wasn't the absence of the houses. It was the attention of the thing underneath, turning the way a sleeper turns. And where its attention passed, the lie went thin, and the lid showed its true nature, which was grass and fog and a slow, cold breathing. I took my hand off the ground and I stood up, and the fog had risen while I crouched. It was at my waist now, and the dome light of my truck, my little yellow tether, was much farther away than it should have been. Linden Way is 40 feet across. The truck was 40 feet away when I crouched. When I stood, it was a soft yellow smudge a long way off across a field of fog that had no street in it. No curbs, no signs, no aprons, just field in every direction, with the truck's light failing at the far edge of it, and the sky overhead, not the orange city glow sky of every other night, but black, a real black, a black with no town under it at all. The lid had gone thin where I was standing because I was standing on it, because I'd put my hand down and made contact, because the one rule I'd worked out, that it was shy of light, that it happened in the dark, I'd obeyed exactly backward. I turned off my lights and stepped out into its dark and walked to the center of the thinnest place and touched it, and now I was on the wrong side of the seam, not in Harrow's reach, in the field, the real one, the one underneath. I'm going to tell you how I got back, and I want to be clear that I don't fully understand it, and that I've made peace with not understanding it, because the alternative is to keep clawing at it, and I've seen what that does. I ran toward the yellow light. That's all. I didn't think. The training that put me out of the truck was gone, burned clean out of me, and what was left was just an animal running toward the one warm-colored thing in a cold black world. And the fog dragged at my legs like water, and the breathing under the ground got faster. I could feel it through my boots, the intervals shortening, the sleeper waking, and the yellow light didn't get closer for what felt like a very long time. And then all at once it did. All at once it rushed at me, and I hit the side of my truck with both hands hard enough to bruise, and I fell into the open door onto the seat, and I had the engine going and the headlights on and the spotlight blazing before I'd even sat up, and it was a street again. Headlights on curbs, on signs, on aprons. Linden Way, 11 driveways, the model home glowing on its corner. The fog ordinary and knee-high and moving in the wind. The sky orange with the town, 5:51 in the morning. I had been out of the truck, by the clock, for 38 minutes. It had felt like 4. I drove out of Harrow's reach so fast I nearly put the truck in a gutter, and I hit the back checkpoint without slowing, just leaned out the window and waved the wand at it as I passed, and I got out onto the county road, and I pulled over on the shoulder, and I sat there with the heat roaring and shook. The radio crackled. 312, Dana said, and her voice was the most beautiful ordinary thing I had ever heard. 312? I show you stationary on the Harrow site for 30-some minutes. Everything 10-4 out there? And I keyed the mic, and here is where I made my choice, the choice that I have to live in now. And I made it in about a second and a half without understanding I was making it. I said, 10-4, Dana. Lot of activity, I cleared it, all secure. And she said copy, and the door closed. I had a chance right there to say the words. To say something's wrong at Harrow's reach, pull the patrol, lose the contract, never go back. And instead I filed a clean report. I told the system everything was secure. because the wanting to know still had me, even then. Even soaked through with that basement cold no. That's the lie I told myself for a while afterward. That it was curiosity. It wasn't curiosity anymore. By then, I knew what was under the field, and curiosity was long dead. What I felt sitting on that shoulder was something I've only got one honest word for, and the word is summoned. I felt like I'd been called on, like I'd put my hand on the lid and the thing under it had felt my hand. And now there was a thread between us, and to quit the route, to never drive back into Harrow's reach, would not cut the thread. It would only leave the thread slack and trailing, and me unable to see where the other end went. Going back was the only way to keep my eyes on it. That's what I told myself. You see how the thing works. It doesn't chase you. It makes leaving feel more dangerous than staying. I went back the next night and the next, and for a while nothing happened at all. 11 aprons, model home on its corner. I'd hit my checkpoints and sweep my spotlight, and the development would sit there being a development, and I started, God help me, to wonder if I'd had some kind of episode out there in the fog. A man does that. A man will take the most reasonable horror and trade it back for a story about his own brain, because a broken brain is at least a thing that happens to people. I read about it. Hypoxia, sleep deprivation, the way the visual system invents stable scenes. I built myself a whole clinical explanation, and I wore it like a coat, and it held for about 9 days. On the 10th day, Dana wasn't on the radio. There was a new voice, a guy named Pruitt, filling in, and I asked where Dana was, and Pruitt said she'd taken some days, family thing, he wasn't sure. And that was ordinary, dispatchers take days. But it put a small cold spot in me because Dana was the only other person who'd seen any piece of this, even just as a blue dot sitting too long on a street. And I didn't like her being gone. I want to be clear that nothing bad happened to Dana that I know of. I'm not telling you she vanished. She came back 2 weeks later, perfectly fine, complained about a sick aunt. I only mention her absence because of what happened on one of the nights she was gone, when there was a stranger on the board who didn't know my patterns, who didn't notice or didn't care how long my dot sat still. It was the 3rd of December, cold enough that the fog had thinned to almost nothing, which I'd have thought would help, would keep the lid solid. But I think now that the fog was never the cause of anything, only a symptom. Only the breath of the thing fogging the cold air and the way your breath fogs a window. My 4:30 pass. I came down Linden Way and the model home was gone again. Empty lot, lone apron. And this time, I didn't stop. This time, I had learned at least that much. I kept the truck rolling and the spotlight off because I knew now the light was no protection, knew it was the opposite. And I drove for the back checkpoint to get out. And as I came around the curve where Linden tees into Whitethorn Hollow, where the model home should have been glowing, my headlights swept across the empty lot, and standing on the lone concrete apron in the middle of the empty lot, facing the street, facing me, was a man. He was standing where the model home's front door would have been if there'd been a model home. Standing on the apron at the top of a driveway that led up from the street to nothing, to grass, to field. And he was dressed like me. That's the part I have to make you understand. He had on the uniform, the dark cargo pants, the jacket with the reflective striping, the duty belt. He had a spotlight in his left hand, held the way I hold mine. And as my headlights crossed him, he lifted his right hand, slow, and he waved the wand in his hand at the air beside him at nothing. At a checkpoint post that wasn't there, the exact gesture I make 100 times a night. The gesture of a man recording that he was somewhere, that he existed at a place at a time. He waved his wand at empty air to log a checkpoint that did not exist, on a driveway that led to a field, in front of a house that wasn't there. And then he turned his spotlight on, and he pointed it at my truck. and the light that came out of it was not light. It went the wrong way. It came toward me, and it did not illuminate anything between us. It arrived at my windshield as a cold white circle, and where it touched the glass, the fog came up on the inside of the cab, my breath suddenly fogging in a truck with the heater going full, the basement cold coming up through the floor and the seat, the slow, enormous breathing starting in the frame of the vehicle itself, and I understood with total clarity that I was looking at the route. Not at a man, at the post, at the thing my route would become, at a guard standing on the lid logging checkpoints forever to keep the count clean, keep the report secure, keep the lie poured solid over the thing underneath, and that the reason there had to be a guard, the reason there had always been a guard out there driving the same loops night after night, was that the patrol wasn't protecting the houses. The patrol was the lid. The watching was the weight. Every checkpoint I touched, every clean report I filed, every all secure I keyed to Dana, I thought I was guarding the development from thieves. I was holding the development down on top of the field. I was the throw pillows on the bed nobody sleeps in. I was the staging. I floored it. I drove through that wrong light and out the back, and I did not wave my wand at the checkpoint. I missed it on purpose. I left the count broken for the first time in my career, and I got out onto the county road, and I kept driving past my next site and past the one after that, and I drove the truck back to the yard 2 hours early with the report incomplete. And I walked into the office and I told Pruitt I was sick, I was going home, send the relief. And he looked at the board and he looked at me and he said, "Suit yourself, 312. And I gave him my wand and my keys, and I drove my own car home in the gray almost dawn, shaking so hard I had to stop twice. I quit the next week. I told them my back. They didn't care. Turnover in this work is constant. A roving officer leaving is a Tuesday. They reassigned the Harrow's reach route to a new hire, a kid, and I thought about warning him and I didn't, because what would I say? And this is the part I have the most trouble with. This is the part that tells me I never really got free, because some animal arithmetic in me understood that as long as the kid was out there driving the loops and touching the buttons, the lid had a weight on it that wasn't me. That the thread that ran from my hand to the thing under the field went slack the moment somebody else picked up the rope. I traded the kid for my own slack thread. I told myself he'd be fine, that I'd had an episode, that there was nothing out there, the same coat I'd worn before. And I've worn it every day since, and it has never once kept me warm. It's been 4 years. I don't drive at night anymore if I can help it. I don't go near new developments, the half-built ones especially, the ones with the graded lots and the lone aprons and the streets named after trees that were cleared to build them. I see one of those concrete tongues sticking out at the edge of a field, a driveway poured before the house, leading up to nothing, and I have to pull over, because I know now what a driveway is. A driveway is a promise that something will be built there. It's the first thing you pour, the apron, the connection between the road and the lot, and then the house is supposed to follow. And all over this country, there are fields full of those promises that never got kept, those concrete tongues leading up to grass, and every one of them is a place where the lie wore thin, and somebody decided to lay a road over it and call it Harrow's Reach or Whitethorn Hollow or whatever, and pay a man to drive the loops at night and hold it down. I looked up the development after. The county still has it platted, 204 lots, and I found the old environmental survey from before they broke ground, the geotechnical report, because part of me needed one more boring answer, one more chain of ordinary events. And the survey said the site had been rejected twice by previous developers. Unsuitable for the planned density, anomalous subsurface readings. The drilling logs were incomplete, the report noted, in the dry language of engineers, that test bores at the center of the parcel could not establish bedrock at depth, and that the equipment returned inconsistent readings consistent with a large subsurface void. A void. They platted 204 homes and a grid of streets over a void they couldn't find the bottom of, and they sold it as a dream. And they hired my company to watch it. I don't have an ending for you. That's the thing about this kind of story, the kind that's true. It doesn't end. It just stops being something you can see. The route is still out there. There's a kid driving it, or by now, somebody after the kid, touching the buttons in order, keeping the count clean, sweeping a spotlight down driveways that lead to fields, filing reports that say all secure, holding it down, and some night, on the late pass, the closest one to dawn, one of those driveways is going to end in grass, and he's going to stop the truck, and he's going to feel that excitement, that awful chosen feeling, the one that the job selects for, the one that makes a man take the route in the first place, and he's going to get out, and he's going to walk over and put his hand down to check. And I could call the company right now. I have the number. I could tell them to pull the patrol, break the count, take the weight off, and let whatever's under that field do what it's going to do, which might be nothing, which might be the end of the county. I don't know. I never got to the bottom of it. Nobody has. That's what the survey said. You can't establish the bottom. I could make that call. I think about making it most nights. But then there'd be no one out there watching the seam. And I find I can't stand that either. I can't stand the development being unwatched any more than I could stand to keep watching it. So I do the thing I learned to do out there in the fog, the thing the route taught me, the only thing it taught me. I file a clean report in my head, and I tell myself everything's secure, and I don't make the call, and I let the kid drive the loops. I blame the day shift, the first time the driveway ended in a field. Now I know there's no day shift. There's no shift at all. There's just the field, and the lid, and the count, and the man they pay to keep it. It's almost dawn where I am. That's the only time I let myself write any of this down. I've found I can't do it in the dark anymore, and I can't do it in full daylight either. Full daylight feels too thin, too much like a thing laid over something, and I catch myself listening for the breathing under the floor. So I do it now, in the gray, in the scene between, which I suppose is where I live now, and I keep the porch light off. I worked out a long time ago that it isn't shy of the light. The light is how it finds the window.